Chapter 32. A little more eager to turn the pages of his book and curiosity invading his mind, Dan looked up at Chippewa. May I get on with it? Of course, Dan, and that's another thing you'll have to consider throughout your travels toward your future, your timing. But I thought you mentioned something about travelling in God's time, so isn't he the one who would decide on my timing? No, Dan, Chippewa answered. Your timing is part of your decision process. If you choose to put the book down right now and have a sleep, for example, that would be your choice and the timing you would have chosen to tackle this particular task. It's like I'd have 3 days to get a shipment to Atlanta, Gustavo interposed. But if I wanted to stop on the way for a while, it's my choice and my timing, right? Chippewa nodded. Something like that, yes. So if you want to turn the pages right now or tomorrow, Gustavo added, it won't make any difference as long as you don't stop your progress altogether. Okay then, let's see what the next tool is, Dan said, turning to the 3rd page of his book. He read the paragraph aloud. Patience is a virtue with which we are all endowed. However, circumstances drive us to foster impatience, rather than its worthwhile opposite. If frustration is allowed to set in, your opportunities will become obstacles, and your goal will be farther than you ever expected. When you reach the level of your patience required to tolerate and accept your situation, you will be on the road to accomplishing your goal. That's the thing Damianos kept mentioning to me. He always told me that I was short on patience and long on frustration. This time Chippewa exploded in laughter. And too right he was, Dan. Patience is very difficult to acquire and master. As the paragraph says, impatience allows for opportunities to become obstacles. Instead of your goal being in reach, every time you show a lack of patience, it moves farther away from you. But doesn't patience also foster frustration? Gustavo asked, relaxing to the back of the sofa. Say you were patiently waiting for the mail to be delivered, Chippewa began. You only will become frustrated if the mailman doesn't come by your house on time, such as he does every day. So patience at that point becomes impatience, which soon turns into frustration. But the mailman may have delayed in delivering the mail, so why should we become impatient? Dan asked. Very good, Dan, Chippewa said. An event that is totally out of your control, such as the mailman being delayed, should not foster impatience, but it does. In fact, more often than not, you're ready to kill the messenger on the spot as soon as he rings the doorbell, aren't you? Dan had to agree. When a delivery is not made on time, I would throttle the guy before. Dan stopped and stared straight ahead. Have you seen something of your future, Dan? Gustavo asked, getting used to Dan's flashbacks or forward flashes by now. Yeah, something to do with pizza. A guy was delivering some boxes and he was late. I almost bit his head off. Dan switched his gaze to Chippewa again. Is that what I'd have to watch for? I mean, I shouldn't get all riled up when something out of my control happens? Precisely, Dan. You will not go as far as throttling the delivery man, because your instincts are not those of a violent man, but you will be frustrated and showing your impatience nonetheless. When the little family woke up after a restless night encumbered of all sorts of imaginings and conjectures as to what life could be without electronic devices, they were surprised to find themselves in their bunks. In the cruiser cabins, nothing had changed. What's going on here? Daniel was the first to ask as he got out of bed. He looked around him and everything was the same. He went to the kitchen and sat down beside Damianos. Have you been waiting here all night? He asked him, wiping the sleep off his eyes. Not really, Daniel. I just curled up and went to sleep like you did. But I thought everything was going to be different somehow. Life without electronic devices at your disposal is not different. What's not different? Gabby asked as she came to join her brother and Damianos at the table. Your life, my dear, as your brother remarked rightly just now, nothing of your life has changed overnight, except that your personal gadgets have disappeared. Good morning, everyone, Malou said, stepping into the kitchen. She tied the belt of her robe and sat down beside Gabby. How did you sleep? She asked her daughter. Don't ask, Mum. I was tossing all night wondering what it would be like if I was unable to call my friends. Same here, Stefano said, coming out of the cabin to join the family. I really don't know what's going on, but I can't remember when I'm due to start university or which one I'm going to choose. Damianos guffawed unexpectedly. I see that you've forgotten your future, haven't you, son? Is that what Damien meant last night when he said that we would have forgotten most of the future, as we remembered it yesterday? Yes, Malou. You remembered most important events or turning points in your lives, but not those inconsequential items that could cloud your thoughts during the journey ahead. Does that mean my choice of university is inconsequential? Stefano looked baffled, not to say displeased. No, Stefano, yet the choice you have made by the time you return home will be perhaps different. How different could it be? I don't remember making the decision, but it must have been the right ones. Why should my future be different just because my dad's future is going to be different? Do you remember our conversation about the outcome being the same, although the path you take being different? Stefano nodded. Well, you can rest assured that nothing will have changed as far as your future is concerned, son. It also depends on your father's decisions and the future you'll be facing when he begins his journey. That sounds like a trip into the unknown, Daniel piped up. That's neat. There's nothing neat about it, Daniel. I remember, Stefano began to say. Remember what, Stefano? Milou looked up at her eldest, who was still standing, his behind leaning against the kitchen counter. I've no idea, Mum. I can't remember anything much. What about you, Gabby? Do you remember something of your future? Damianos asked. She shook her head. I've been sitting here wondering what I was doing before I came here with everyone. I mean, I remember Dad being lost in time and all that, but nothing of what I was doing before we left. What about you, Milou? Damianos pressed on. Nothing much, but I do remember sitting in the garden of our house. She paused. And nothing about being in the hospital with Dan. He had a skiing accident. As I mentioned, Damianos interrupted, that's what I meant by recalling major events of your lives. He looked at the children's faces. That event is locked in your mother's mind so that she will not forget the impact it had on your family. Does that mean Dad will have another skiing accident? Gabby asked, visibly troubled at the mere mention of her father being hurt somehow. No, it doesn't, Gabby, Damianos answered. Yet the impact the accident had on his mind or even behaviour afterwards will remain with him in his future. What if he decides to go skiing again? Should we stop him then? Damianos shook his head. Not at all, Gabby. In fact, you'll be able to express your opinion on the matter, but ultimately your father will choose which path to take. But what about you, Daniel? Milou asked. Do you remember anything? Only that I was playing war games and that I went to a round with Gustavo, Dad's friend, and saw that war was no game at all. Very good, Damianos said, visibly pleased with everyone's response. And now, how about we take this cruiser out to sea and do some fishing for a change? What about breakfast? Milou exclaimed, already on her feet. We'll eat on the run, Damianos replied, laughing. All right, Dan, Chippewa said, getting up from the chair. Why don't we have a walk outside to stretch our legs? What about the book? Dan was quick to ask. Do I take it with me? By all means, son, you'll have to read the next paragraph, won't you? Obviously hesitant to leave the house, Dan didn't move from the sofa. Gustavo stood up. So what is it going to be, Dan? Are you ready for a stroll, or do you want to stay here and read your book all by your lonesome? Okay, I'm coming, Dan replied, closing the book and getting up. Where are we going? He asked Chippewa. To discover the world, Dan. But I haven't read all 12 paragraphs yet. Dan was panicking. Chippewa turned from the door in front of which he was standing. It's just a turn of phrase, Dan. No need to panic. Besides, even in a square inch of grass, there is a whole world for one to discover. You will never have to go far to see what the world could offer you. Okay, I guess. Dan didn't sound very adventurous at the moment. What's the matter? Gustavo queried. Have you lost your punk or something? Dan shook his head as he put the book under his arm. It's just that I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm kind of lost, if you know what I mean. All right, let's get out of here first, Chippewa said decisively, opening the door to a bright, sunny day, and then we can continue this conversation. He extended an arm for Dan and Gustavo to get out of the old mansion. Dan turned around as soon as he was a few steps away from the front stoop. He looked up. It looks so old, he remarked, almost as if it had been here forever. Perhaps it has, Dan, perhaps it has, Chippewa replied, looking up to the roof as well. Is this like a halfway house or something? Gustavo asked Chippewa. He laughed heartily. Yes, yeah, you could say that. It's a safe haven for many and a house of learning for many others. Many others like me, Dan put in, returning his gaze to Chippewa. Yes, son, but for you it is a point of departure. From here you are called to go on a long road toward your ultimate goal, and during your journey you'll need another tool. You mean the one described in the next paragraph, right? Precisely, but before we go into that, why don't we go to the back garden where there are benches? We could have a sit down there. That's not a very long walk, Gustavo said, grinning. I thought you were going to take us on a trek through the forest. He nodded in the direction of the woods abutting the lawn at the foot of the hill, where we would pick up berries or something. Are you hungry? Chippewa asked, returning the grin. Well, a sandwich wouldn't go unnoticed right now, I'd say. Okay, Gustavo, let's go to the backyard and see what we could cook up for you. Gustavo turned a querying glance to Dan. Don't look at me, I have no idea what's in store, Dan replied, following Chippewa to the back of the house. When they turned the corner, a whiff of aroma reached their nostrils. Oh, wow, how did you manage that? Gustavo exclaimed when he saw a bunch of hamburgers and hot dogs sizzling happily on the barbecue. That's one of my tricks, he replied, going to the table beside the grill. And before you ask, this is no magic, although it may look like it. What is it then? Dan asked, going around Chippewa to have a closer look at the buns lined up on the top of the upper shelf. That's the power of imagination, Dan. When you imagine yourself somewhere doing something hard enough, your mind turns your wish or dream into reality. You mean like, my wish is your command? Gustavo asked. Chippewa shook his head. Not at all, Gustavo. It has to do with your power to make your dream come true. We all have the power to transform dreams into reality, with a little perseverance and determination. Okay. When can we eat, then? Dan asked impatiently now. Aha, Chippewa said. Here it is again. That impatience of yours, isn't it, Dan? He lifted a kindly glance to his pupil. Yeah, that's because all this made me hungry. Okay, why don't you two help yourselves to hamburgers or hot dogs? Then we'll go and sit on the benches behind us. Gustavo and Dan turned their heads all at once. And yes, there they were, benches alongside a table covered with all the trimmings that could accompany the best of cookouts.